I've got another little update for you on the Harlequin build. It wasn't going very well with the diagnostics I was doing. Last night I went through and I changed every single chip on the board with the other pack that I've got. I've still got another kit to build, and it made no difference. It was doing exactly the same thing. I reflowed everything. I checked as many components as I could, and it just wouldn't work. What the behavior it was exhibiting was it wasn't selecting the right ROMs on the selector switch. And often it would just crash. It was like it was not reading the ROM properly. So I got some messages overnight. I'll show you those. The first one I got on the last update video was from Mikey in New Zealand. Thanks for staying up all night and fixing my problems. And he says R61 is missing the right hand edge of the board. It's used as the pull-up resistor for the dip switch. And I didn't have the information to hand, but I thought, no, that's wrong. I'm sure I've checked that, and R61 is optional. And I'll show you that to prove that I'm not going crazy. This is the instructions, and down here R61 has Joy written next to it, and that means optional for joystick interface. See joystick interface section. So it doesn't show that it's, well, I mean, that's pretty unambiguous. That just means you don't have to install it. It's optional. If I'm not installing the joystick interface, then I don't need that. So we'll leave that. We'll put a pin in that one. The next message I got was from lovely Mark at the Retro channel. Hello, Mark. Thank you. He says, it certainly feels like an issue with the higher address lines on the ROM. I'm guessing the dip switches connect the higher address lines, A16, 17, 18, for a 29F040 ROM to ground or 5 volts. He's absolutely correct. This is how you can select different ROM banks. If one of those has a poor connection or is floating, then you will either not be able to select certain banks using the dip switches, or you'll always get the same bank. That's exactly the behavior it was exhibiting. My suggestion would be to put the 29F040 in, set all the switches to either on or off, and check pins 1, 2 and 30 on your scope and make sure they have either a solid 5 volts or ground. Then flip the switches and check again for the opposite reading. So the first thing I did this morning was come out here and do exactly that. It wasn't the first thing I did. I had birthday breakfast and chocolate. But once I did that, I checked it was ground whether the switch on those 3 pins, on pins 1, 2 and 30, were showing ground whether the switches were on or off. If any of them do not have a solid 5 volt or ground, depending on how the switches are set, then suspect either switches themselves. I checked the switch as much as I could, but I kind of suspected it might be the switch, but it seemed to be functioning as you would expect. I checked it with a multimeter. Pull-up resistors, if any, on those lines, or a bad connection somewhere in between. Bad connection somewhere in between, unlikely. I checked my soldering again and again and again, and I mean the chances of the board being manufactured incorrectly I didn't think were very high, so I didn't think it was that. And he says, have a great new year and birthday, see you in 2024. You too, Mark, have a great new year. So Mikey and Mark must be onto something. I did wonder if maybe R61, I mean there's no pull-up resistors shown on the schematics that I could see on the schematics that are shown in the manual. In this section here, it shows the switch and how it's connected with V17 to select between 27C256s or C512s. If you use a smaller ROM, you have to change J17 so that 5 volts on the right pin. And it shows that the X16, 17 and 18 are here, and it shows some stuff going on here, but this is U2, this is the ROM itself, but it doesn't show any connection between them. It doesn't show any resistor pack. And the actual schematics themselves are printed out in the manual, and they're really small and almost impossible to read. There is a QR code. I won't show the whole thing because it's proprietary. that I got and had a look at, and this part here is the relevant section. So that is the same there as this section here. Doesn't show any relation to R61, which is up here. And this is all of the joystick section. So that's the IC, I think it's U39, that controls the onboard joystick interface. And there's J16, which enables or disables the joystick. That's the joystick header. That's the joystick port. This and this don't look like they're connected. Then it doesn't show any connection there. So R61 is not shown as being relevant to this in any way in the instructions. In fact, it explicitly says it's optional and is not needed. So I put it in anyway, and it worked. So the the instructions are actually, well, there might be some reason for it, but as far as I can see, in my limited knowledge, the instructions didn't help me in this way. I think with most people will just put all of the components in because they're optional. They might as well just put them in. Because I was in a hurry, doing it on a live stream, and wanted to get up and working, so I didn't bother putting it in. It was optional. I didn't need it. So I switched it on and it worked. So let's have a look. Right, with all of the switches off, I should get diagnostics. And with all the switches on, I should get, I think it's the 128K ROM. Yeah. Let's go for something a bit more unusual. That's a +2. And that's some weird one. It's a modified one. I don't know exactly what it is. ZX81, that's very cool. And an arcade game designer. There's all kinds in it. The only one I haven't found is the 48K ROM. There it is. No, it's not. Yay, there we go. There's the 48K ROM. So it's all working now. I've just got to put the capacitor back in. I did make a few mistakes. There was one chip with a leg bent over, and that capacitor that I installed the wrong way around, plus one leg on a resistor that wasn't soldered correctly, or wasn't soldered at all. That meant the blue was missing on RGB. But we got there in the end, and thank you to everybody that helped. I probably could have done it without you. But yeah, thank you very much for all your birthday wishes, and Happy New Year.